Okay, the first example is find the percent increase. Okay, so let's go ahead and underline that, right? A percent increase, not just an increase, from 2 to 8. Okay, so the percent increase, so let's go ahead and write, there's a formula for that, right? Percent increase. And from the quick intro video, we know that the percent increase, right, is definitely a fraction, right, percent per 100. And this is the amount of increase, right, divided by the original amount. So original amount. Okay, so what is the amount of increase? Okay, well, we have 2, right? And if we go to 8, right, the difference is definitely, right, 6, because 2 plus 6 is 8. So the difference is 6. And what's the original amount? Well, we started with 2, right? This guy is the original amount. Okay, so then we know half of 6 is 3. Okay, so is this 3%? Well, not quite. This 3 is really, I mean, if you just write the number 3, I mean, this could represent like $3. So there's a decimal point right there, and if you want to add, right, 2 zeros or 3 zeros, it doesn't matter. But this is a decimal. You want to change it to a percent. So if we multiply by 100, which just means I'm moving the decimal to the right 2 places, that's going to give us 300%, right? 3 is equal to 300%, right? This is just the decimal form, right? And that's the percent form. So our percent increase is 300%. So maybe, let's see, percent increase. So notice that, I mean, the math is not very difficult. It's really just basic arithmetic, right? Dividing numbers and subtracting some numbers. But I mean, the goal is to really grasp this, what percent increase and of course percent decrease means, because it's very useful when you're trying to analyze data. So let's see if this makes sense, because I want you to ask yourselves, does it make sense when you find your percent increase? So let's start with if we notice, okay, we started at 2, right? This was our original amount. And we went all the way to 8, to our final amount. And again, 2 can represent, I mean, we can be talking about, $2 million to $8 million. Okay, if you started with $2 million and, I don't know, 20 years later, you end up with $8 million, or even 5 years later, it'd be nice. I mean, that's a pretty big jump. So, I mean, does this make sense that it's 300% increase? Well, I mean, if you're a visual learner, you can also, I mean, we started with, okay, here's, I'll just draw 2 circles for $2 million. Well, we started at 2 and we ended up with 2, 4, 6, right? We ended up with 8. So what's the relationship between the original amount and, right, 2 million and 8 million? Well, I mean, here's 2 circles, but we have, let me make this a different color, right? I have 6 more circles, right? So that's 3 times the original amount. So if it's 3 times the original, let me get my pointer here. If it's 3 times the original amount, I mean, that's what we have 3 here. It makes sense that it's 300%, because we know 100% of 2 is 2, right? I mean, 50% of 2 is 1. So 100% of 2 is 2, and we're increasing, right, 100% every single time. Or another way, let's see, maybe if you want to say, right, that's definitely 100% increase, right? That's another 100, and that's another 100. So it makes sense. Okay, it is a 300% increase. Or I'm just trying to think of other different ways of explaining this. Let's see, 100%. I mean, the key is, 100% of 2, right, is 2. So I keep adding, right, 2 more, I guess $2 million more each time. So that's the percent increase. Now, let's look at the percent decrease. If the percent increase is 300%, my question to you is, does this mean the percent decrease is 300%? Did it decrease by 300% because the difference is only 6? Okay, well, let's do the math and again analyze this. So we have, let's do, okay, percent decrease. Okay, so here we're starting with the percent decrease is, I mean, we have 2 to 8, but now we're going from 8 to 2, right? So think of, you started with $8 million and you're down to 2 million. Okay, so if you've lost $6 million, what's the percent decrease? So percent decrease, right, from our formula is just, well, the amount of decrease. Well, 8 minus 2 is definitely 6, divided by the original amount, and the original amount is 8. Okay, so if we reduce this, right, we can divide by 2, and so we get 3/4, and we know 3/4 is 75%. So our percent decrease is 75%. Notice it's not 300%. So just because the increase is 300% doesn't mean the decrease is going to be 300%. Okay, so the math tells us that, I mean, it's clearly not a 300% decrease. It's only 75% decrease. So, I mean, the math is good, but I want you to really understand, not just because of the math, but why. I want you to understand or ask yourself, this is explain why the, percent, explain why the percent decrease of, 300%, doesn't make sense, or however you want to word it, doesn't make sense. I want you to explain why it doesn't make sense. Okay, well, what if it was 300%? Okay, well, 300%, well, let's even make it easier here. Okay, we started with 8. Okay, so 100% of 8, okay, is 8. Okay, what's 200% of 8? Well, 200% of 8 is 16, right? Because 100% is 8, so 200 would be 8 plus 8, so 16. 300% of 8. Well, 100% again is 8 plus another 8 plus another 8 is going to be 24. So 300% of $8 billion is 24 billion. So if it was 300% decrease, that means that you would start at 8. Okay, and maybe let's make this maybe pink. So here's our 300%. That means I would be subtracting 24, and well, 8 minus 24 would be negative 16. So that means if I started at 8 and I would end up at negative 16, that would be a 300% decrease. But we're not going from 8 to negative 16. We're going from 8 to 2. Okay, that's why it doesn't make sense. And I mean, again, hopefully the 75 does make sense, because from 8 to 2, well, from 8 to 4, we know is 50%, right? And then from 4 to 2 is another 25%. So the 75% does make sense. So when you're working with percent decrease, okay, the quantities for decrease can never exceed, right? It can't be more than 100%. When a quantity is decreased by 100%, that means it's reduced to zero. So again, if you have $8 million and I have 100% decrease, that means I'm at $0, right? Any more than that, you'd be in the negatives. But I mean, the negatives, I mean, you'd be, that means your company would go bankrupt. But again, a percent decrease is only, we only want 100% would be the max. With percent increase, it's fine. So again, hopefully, again, I know it's, the math is not hard, but I want you to understand, why, what this means, because you're going to be analyzing this data in your respective fields. Okay, so that's the only example that I'm going to do with percent increase and decrease, because the math is not very difficult. But again, I'll have you practice more in the with the IGA in class.